Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn live show for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And folks, these are live conversations. As I like to say, these conversations are by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And folks, we're going to have a little bit of fun today. I just have a feeling we are going to have a little bit of fun today. The gentleman I'm joined with today, his name is Nick Schneider. He is the Director of Solutions Consulting with Contentsquare, as you can see in the label there, North America. He is based in the Bay Area, known to some as a good corn-fed young man. I think it's the term he told me. We were just backstage cutting it up a little bit, and I think we're going to have a little bit of fun today. Now, the reason I invited Nick to join me, he and I met a few months ago, and then we were having a chat online after the fact, and he said something to the effect of, well, you know, Chris, I like to establish my expectations with my team, but I also like to tell them what they can expect from me. And that really struck a chord. So we're going to dig into that, and then we'll see where else we go. With that, Nick, thank you so much for being here, sir. Welcome. How are you doing today? I'm
doing great. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this actually for quite a bit. Like you said, after meeting you in person a few months ago, I've been excited about this and really looking forward to joining you live. So appreciate you having me on today.
Well, and I think you just told me that this is sort of like your last official day of summer because the kids go back to school tomorrow. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. Kids start school tomorrow, and today they are in the house just hanging out, getting their last kicks in before they hit their grind for the rest of the year.
Indeed. And by the way, it blows me away that kids start so early. My kids are no longer kids. They're all out of the house, and 4 out of 5 are officially off the payroll, and one's got one more semester to go, and then she'll be off the payroll. So.
Yeah, I'm saving up for that part. I'm saving up for the payroll.
We're on the other side. We're on the other side of that mountain. So, Nick, I introduced you as the Director of Solutions Consulting North America for Contentsquare. One of the things I love inviting people to do up front is just tell a little bit of your background, tell a little bit of your story. How, many of us sort of fell into pre-sales or solution consulting. Do you mind sharing your story, how you got into the role?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I can go way back. I actually started off my technology career at Marketo, actually back in the day, pre-IPO Marketo. So it was definitely a wild time and a very fast-paced, very interesting market to be in. And actually, I started out as an SDR intern of all things.
Okay. Wow.
And so I cut my teeth, earned my stripes, and actually had to work my way from an intern spot into a competitive SDR spot. And then from there, kind of work my way through the fast-paced, fun environment that these SDRs go through, which is it's so critical and so important. But it gave me a really strong perspective on sales and process and qualification and frankly discovery right out the gate. And from there, I sort of naturally fell into an opportunity at Marketo to join the SC organization after sort of making a name for myself as best as I could. Got that opportunity, and since then been a pre-sales person ever since at Marketo. I moved to Tibco for a little while, been at a couple of small startups, one of them called Everstring, which was acquired by ZoomInfo. And most recently now I've landed here at Contentsquare, and I've been here for about 6.5 years. I started out as an individual contributor and have worked my way up now to managing the North America organization and supporting enterprise and mid-market sales here at Contentsquare.
That's a great story, and that is it's interesting. A lot of people come from more of a technical background, and very often somebody recognizes that in spite of the fact that they're technical, they also have some of the people skills, and they sort of get drawn into it. Your story's a little bit different. So you started out as an SDR. Out of curiosity, what did you study in college?
So I split my time with business administration and engineering. So I did have a technical background. And I've always been sort of a computer guy from the day my father was actually a vice president of engineering when I was growing up. So I was building my own computers, and we actually had, in the 90s, we had a T1 line going to my house, which was wild. We had a giant server rack and like all sorts of stuff, right? So like we sort of nerded out when I was a kid, and I loved that stuff, but I knew I didn't want to sit behind a desk per se and just code all day. I wanted to do something more interactive. And I was unaware, like most folks are, of this pre-sales thing that exists. And like you said, it kind of fell into my lap. And I was, like I said, I was given an opportunity by a really good manager early in my career to join and sort of continue to develop, and been lucky enough to get where I am today. Probably a little bit of skill involved, but luck's always a good part of it as well. And so that's sort of by generic background as well as it relates to like my technical aptitude. But like I've said, the best SCs are the ones who can do both, right? There's this sort of this hybrid person.
100%, 100%. By the way, Cliff says hello from Richmond, Virginia, a few hours south of me. Cliff, nice to see you, my friend. He's a regular attendee in these conversations. By the way, if there's anybody else out there, if you care to say hello, please feel free to do so. We don't see who's out there. By the way, if you have any questions for Nick, of course, myself, please feel free to ask. So Nick, first, let's talk a little bit about some of the expectations that you established for your team. And by the way, just that alone, I think is so critical. I think as SC leaders, we owe it to our people to make it clear what our expectations are. Well, what are some of the things that you put on the table for your team?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I sort of have these 10 rules, right? That I really have my team focus on. And there's a couple of reasons for it is, kind of taking even a step out of just SCs. Like SCs are such a strong Swiss Army knife for an organization. And ultimately, as a leader, one of the things that gets me most excited is enabling my SCs to be more successful, either in their current path as a pre-sales person, and that's what they want to do for the next few years, or enabling them to move cross-functionally, whether that's to sales or to product or customer success or wherever they want to go. But in order to do those moves, they have to be successful in what they're doing today, right? Yeah. And so I had these sort of core 10 rules, 10 not rules, but 10 sort of criteria that I look at. And ultimately it comes down to like what gets people bonused and promoted, financial gains, personal motivation, challenges. And it really comes down to sort of like, not just being a product expert within our stack, but more importantly, really being seen as like a domain expert in the market that we operate in. And then in addition to that, it's, being a strong collaborator within the team and cross-functionally. It's being proficient in technology. As much as I say, I love this hybrid business technical person, like you got to have a strong level of a technical aptitude to be able to communicate effectively. And what's super, super important in this role is being able to create value stories, right? So really focusing on not just what we do, but ultimately coming down to why does it matter and how is it different, and really communicating that effectively to our customers or to our prospects or to new sales reps when they come on board. So I have this set of criteria, and I find it to be really, really important to do. So again, going back to bonus and promotions, it goes back to a really strong career path, and it gives us the opportunity to sort of grade and scorecard everybody by that, and then provide the right types of guidance they need. That could be peer mentoring, it could be manager to individual contributor. It could also be getting them engaged in cross-functional projects that maybe they wouldn't have the opportunity for, or that we never saw that they would be a fit for, but they've expressed keen interest. So it just gives us a solid foundation to build on. And then from there, we sort of execute and we revisit this on a regular basis to make sure that we are staying on track and getting that person to where they want to be. Obviously, I never want to see anybody leave my team, but I always want to see everyone be successful. And if that does mean they have to leave my team to go do that next part of life, I'm really excited for them and I want to help facilitate that.
Such a great attitude. And I suspect your team appreciates that a great deal. And they, as a result, they probably don't want to leave your team because they know that you're actually in it for them. But the truth is you're helping them groom themselves to move on to something else. Do you find as you reflect on your 10 principles or your 10 tenets, are there one or two that maybe some of the individuals, or maybe when you bring people onto the team, one or two that they seem to need the most sort of help developing and coaching around?
Yeah, I think there's probably two big ones, right? There's a lot of blocking and tackling X's and O's, like, do you know this thing or do you not know this topic, right? And then we can obviously iterate on that. The ones that I think are a bit harder and need more coaching are the ones that are a lot more subjective. So one of the ones I look at is like, how do you really embed yourself into a continuous process of learning and developing your own sort of internal thought leadership within the organization, right? So how are you seen ultimately translate a different way? How do you develop yourself into some level of a subject matter expert into the area that you're most passionate about, right? You didn't join this company, ideally, we didn't just hire you for a paycheck and to put a butt in the seat. We hired you because we believe in not only what you can do today, but what you can develop into. And so for that, I really want to instill a culture around how do you really think about learning and building your skill set, and becoming sort of this domain expert in what we do. And so that whether it's other SCs or whether it's, other teams coming to you and seeing you as a critical asset to that topic. And so really working on it. Again, that's super subjective because it's personalized to the person. And then it's also dependent upon how they learn. And so you sort of have to, as a manager, have to kind of figure out what works best for that person. I think the other one too, that's always it's a never ending one. It's just, you got to be strong at discovery, right? But for me, discovery goes from not just like, hey, what technology stack do you have? Or, are you looking at competitors? Like again, I go back to the X's and O's. For me, it's like, how do you take discovery and actually turn it into a selling differentiator for you? And so again, that's a bit subjective because a lot of that takes reps, right? That's internal reps of role play scenario situations and sort of peer learning. We use call recording tools here. So, leveraging that as a coaching mechanism. But again, some of that just takes time, and you got to just flex those muscles and see what works well for you and your style. Because what's made me successful may not make the next person, but we can sort of play off each other and continue to develop them.
Yeah. So double clicking on the words that I wrote down were growth mindset. That's how I interpreted what you were saying about continuous learning, seeking to become viewed as a thought leader. Is that a fair way to summarize that? Is really developing that growth mindset?
Absolutely, right. I always think about it this way: like the definition of insanity is what doing the same thing over and over again. Right? Like I think Einstein was the one. That's an old famous quote, right? And so for me, it's like there is comfort and repeatability in developing a sense of linearity in how you approach it, but you got to constantly be trying new stuff and doing things a little bit different because the market's just changed so rapidly, and we all know why that is now even more so, right? There's this AI term that's everywhere. It's changing the game of how everything is getting played right now. And so if you don't have that growth mindset and continually trying to adapt your skills and push yourself to that next level, unfortunately, you're probably going to get left behind a bit. And so if you don't take that really to heart, it's going to be a real challenge for you in the future. And so for me, when we hire SCs, we sort of intrinsically are looking for those characteristics, which is a hard thing to find on someone's resume, right? You really got to have those discussions. And then from there, it's as you bring them on board, and then as you sort of further develop them over time, it's continuing to focus on that.
Yeah. I'll assume just for a moment that the change you're referring to is the explosion of AI.
Oh, 100%.
And now that we've sort of touched on that, I'm going to take just a brief tangent. How do you see your team members or the folks on your team? How do you see them either responding to or reacting to AI? Are they embracing AI? Are they feeling intimidated and threatened by AI? Is a little bit of both? How would you describe how your team is embracing this new technology?
Yeah, I would say it's always probably going to be a little bit of both. Everyone's, I think, a little bit nervous around what this really means. But like you and I are actually talking about a little bit before backstage, right? Prior to jumping on live here, is like, at the end of the day, the one thing that's always going to happen, especially in the enterprise sales model, is people are going to buy from people, right? And so by acknowledging that and having AI help support that, as opposed to saying it could be in replace of, unless you're selling widgets, which is like I have widget 1 and widget 2, and like the difference between them is it's not much. In reality, your skill set's underutilized there anyways, right? So get to something that's a bit more complex. But for us, it's really about how do we bring it in-house and really leverage it to amplify our ability to deliver value to our customers and our prospects. And that's across the entire revenue funnel, right? And that's across the first time we talk to them, all the way through, not even just when they become a customer. It's really the regular engagement that we have with them, especially in our environment, right? We're a multi-product company. So a lot of our customers maybe start with 1 or 2 things, and then they sort of go from there. And so for us, it's using AI to help amplify our ability to understand the needs of the customer, what's going to resonate most effectively, and a strong feedback loop. And again, using that to get your skills to continue to grow in that skill set.
Yeah. And again, continuing on this just very brief detour.
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you, how are you as an SE leader, if you can share, of course, I don't want you to divulge anything you can't share.
Of course.
But what are you, in what ways are you using AI to help you do your job better?
Yeah, I mean, we have AI in our product, so I'm going to put that one to the side for now because I think that's sort of like table stakes nowadays. For me, we use AI to help accelerate the way that we coach, mentor, and develop our people. Because at the end of the day, my job as an SC leader revolves around recruiting the right type of people, driving revenue within the organization, and developing the people I have. So, we use it in the first two, but for me, the most important area that I can leverage and focus on is developing people. So that's coaching and mentoring opportunities and using that to actually take live conversations and see how that goes, right? Pulling that in. It's also taking some of these inputs that I talked about, right? These expectations I set. We actually have our SC scorecard themselves, where they feel like they fit, and we take a look at that ourselves as managers, and we sort of start to identify based on these trends and what we're seeing in the industry. We help AI to help leverage and amplify how do we potentially build a customized and personalized plan for those people to further develop and amplify them. So it's for us mainly used, and for me, I mainly use it in that way today. There's obviously a plethora of other things that we could do for it. And we are doing that as well with like demo environments and all sorts of other stuff that way. But again, I think that's I see that as like, it's needed in its core. For me, that's not it's not like it's at the forefront of it. It's like, it's just required. This way of really using it to amplify and develop people, I think is going to potentially make the difference sometimes in sales cycles and really allow us to win more frequently, win more often, and continue that body of success that we've had here at Contentsquare.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, I completely agree. And I talk to a lot of people who are marginally, if not significantly, concerned that AI is going to replace either the SE role, replace the demo, et cetera. And my position is, I don't think it's ever going to replace you and your job. There's certain things that at least right now, and hopefully within our careers, can only be done by a human and won't be done by an AI, presumably. That being said, we're kidding ourselves if we're not leveraging AI, and we actually
100%.
should be using AI not just to help us do our jobs better, but like you said, let's use AI to help develop others. So I absolutely love that. The second of the two things that I asked were maybe top of the list. You said discovery. And you said you said a term that I find particularly intriguing. You said discovery done right can really be a selling differentiator. Here's my question on that. I hear a lot about, quote, discovery fatigue. Prospects and just people in general. Let's not call them prospects. Business people who are looking for solutions are tired of being asked so many questions. They have discovery fatigue. So knowing that customers or prospects or business people are now, let's say, sort of wary of too much discovery and too many questions, and are more times than not just eager to hear about and see solutions. How do you coach your teams into doing discovery to the point where it's actually a selling differentiator?
Yes, it is something that is top of mind constantly, and it ties back to those expectations. I said it's really a giant flywheel at the end of the day. It's like, that's how it's crafted the way it's crafted, is because I do not want my SCs to get on a call and just start rambling off questions like that are very generic, could be done with a little bit of research, could be done via AI. There's a bunch of stuff out there to help get the basics out the gate. Like true differentiated discovery is those tier 3 and tier 4 questions where a prospect or a customer is coming on because there is potentially something we can do for them. And that's what we're also doing. We're qualifying some of that stuff as well. But they would need to learn something new. And if in this process of discovery, I am teaching them something new, which ultimately goes back to right thought leadership, domain expertise, and those other intrinsic characteristics that go beyond just knowing my product well. If I do that, and I do that very, very well, I have now already started to lay the groundwork for differentiating in an opportunity, especially if it's competitive, or frankly, if I'm competing against the tell all be all no decision opportunity, right? Like, well, this may not be the right fit because I have this other project, right? So for me, discovery, where I'm helping the customer prospect learn a new thing, whatever that thing is, that's where you start to win hearts and minds and really sell that we aren't just a technology provider, that we're a strategic asset to help you achieve whatever that business outcome is that you're really trying to go solve for.
I absolutely love that. And Nick, it's interesting. One of the things that I'm teaching in the workshops that I run now is in essence that very thing, that discovery really has two objectives. One objective is pretty obvious, that we're trying to gather as much information as we can to determine whether or not we can help them and just determine the best way to position and demonstrate the solution. The second objective is what you just touched on, and I will argue it's more important than the first, which is the objective of discovery should be to ask questions that they don't know the answer to. Correct, ask questions that they haven't considered before, which in essence is an invitation for them to broaden their thinking. It's an invitation for them to consider things that they hadn't considered as even a possibility, right? If we can ask questions that rather than get, or responded to with an answer, but are responded to with what I call just consideration, like, hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. No one's ever mentioned that to me before. And if you start to do that right, you can actually start to insert the sort of like subtle answers to those questions. And this is where like the AI lacks all of this context, mind you, and which is why I'm a big fan of like this role is going to exist for a long, long time, is the differentiation that then your product, set of solutions, company, whatever provides, as you guys see as core differentiators, are sort of subtly inserted as part of that discovery, where then the customer goes, that's interesting, I do need to consider that. And you go, guess what? We're the only ones who do it, right? And at that point, if you do that very well, I mean, it's not game over, obviously. You still got a lot of work to do. But if you're the one influencing and seizing, we all know you're in a great spot out the gate.
Yeah. Well, and to put a bow on this part of the conversation, if the individuals, and I hate just referring to them as prospects, because I feel like that's just that, I don't know, I just feel like that's derogatory. If the business professionals that you're speaking with walk away from the meeting thinking to themselves, wow, that individual got me thinking of things that I hadn't thought of before. And now my perspective has evolved and grown. The chances that they're going to want to meet again and learn more, so much higher. By the way, Cliff said, and this is exactly what we're talking about, bring your conclusions and ask the customer to validate. At the end of the day, and thanks for that, Cliff, at the end of the day, I call this the Socratic method of selling, right? The Socratic method of teaching is what? Teaching through the use of questions. We ask questions that help the students discover the answers for themselves, right? The Socratic method of selling is we ask questions that help customers become convinced themselves.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nick, let me just hit pause just for a moment. Folks, I'm speaking to Nick Schneider. He is the Director of Solutions Consulting with Contentsquare, North America, with Contentsquare. We're talking about expectations. He leads a team of SEs. He established his expectations for them. We've talked a little bit about that. Now we're going to talk about the reverse side of the equation. He made it very clear to say, now this is what you can expect from me. And I absolutely love that. Nick, let's pick that apart a little bit. First of all, is this something that a leader did with you and you learned from that experience? Was this something that you just wish leaders did with you before you got into management?
Yeah.
Or how did you gain this inspiration?
I think, I've had it done to me in subtle ways over the course of my career. I think a lot of it, though, it's been individualized, right? And just being like, as a manager to an IC relationship, they told me, here's what I really need you to do and focus on. And so we've built that. But in reality, a lot of that kind of to me seems very short-term oriented. And, almost like quarterly driven, right? Which is great. It's at least something to be shooting for and meeting a North Star. For me, I wanted to like roll it out a little bit further. And I obviously have a lot of friends at other organizations, and we've talked about different things that that they do from management style, that we do from management style. There's been a lot of leaders at Contentsquare that I've been really, really lucky to learn from, and really been lucky to be a part of their organization, who've brought in their own skill sets and their own sort of ways of thinking in management. So I've taken bits and pieces really from everybody throughout my career, and then obviously added my own twist for it. And so for me, I then kind of took all that information, have been this giant document, this giant playbook actually that I've developed over the course of these years, and it evolves, quite regularly. And so at the end of the day, I've really distilled it down to these 8 core concepts that most people can expect from me as a leader within this organization. And by the way, this is the same type of conversation that we're having today, the same one that I have with my SCs. We actually go present this to the larger sales and go-to-market organization, because it's really important for them as our business partners to understand how I'm managing the SCs and what the SCs can expect of me, and that relationship, so that they understand sort of that larger environment that we operate in, right? Because we're a giant machine, and we got to keep this engine going. And so for me, that's really how I've developed this. And again, it can change slightly, different words and terminology and focus areas at any point in time, but this is really my core playbook of things that I need to focus on as a leader to make my team successful.
So let's walk. You don't necessarily have to walk us through all 8 of them, but what are some of these 8 core concepts that are in your vision most important?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You actually said the one earlier when I talked about the individual. I actually have it written down for one of the ones is instilling growth mindsets and a continuous learning culture, right? It's one of the biggest ones. So, I mean, we've talked about that ad nauseum. We can always go back to that. The other one for me is building a culture of curiosity and customer obsession. I think constantly focusing on the customer and constantly focusing on the market and constantly instilling this mindset of what really makes our customers want this stuff in the first place and make them successful. What do they think about? What keeps them up at night? And constantly revisiting that, which, by the way, requires actually a cross-functional mindset as well, because that pulls in customer success and sales and product. And so again, it goes down to this giant flywheel of an organization that we are at Contentsquare, and constantly trying to do my best as a leader to bring those pieces together. So for me, that's one of the big ones. And then the other one is, I talked about developing people a lot. I really want, and I continue to focus on developing career path opportunities and growth within the organization. So that goes back to, are you going to be an IC? Do you want to go to more of a specialized route? Are you trying to move into another team? Again, I don't want you to do so for selfish reasons, but like, that's not my job as a leader. My job as a leader is to develop you. And even if that means having you leave, that's okay too, as long as you're successful doing that. So that's probably another big one is how do we develop strong career path opportunities for people on the team?
Yeah. When you use the term customer obsession, I think sometimes people interpret that to mean, well, the customer's always right, or we just do whatever the customer asks us to do or tells us to do.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a dangerous mindset. Do you ever have people sort of run into this challenge where sometimes customer obsession means telling them they don't necessarily, or telling them the things that they don't necessarily want to hear but need to hear?
Yes, for me, it's the latter. And like, there's so many good examples of this, but like, customer obsessed is doing what's right by the customer, even if it's the opposite of what they may be asking you for. We've all been part of sales cycles where, the rep is trying to fit the square peg into a round hole because they need to get a deal done, or we're trying to sell to this great logo or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, the answer still might be like, hey, we just don't do that well, and this is going to make a bad relationship. And like, having that transparent, honest conversation with a customer, which to me, it goes back to being customer obsessed, is doing what's right by them, ultimately will yield significantly more positive effects than getting that short-term win of whatever it is that you're doing. And I've seen it over and over and over again, where that prospect or that customer or that person, that business organization, that business professional will come back and they'll say, I had such a good experience, even though the answer was no. Like, you helped leave me with such a good taste in my mouth that I constantly will remember you, right? And it's happened over and over again. And so for me, it's thinking about that, and the customer is not always right, I guess is probably the better way to say it. It's more of the customer has a perspective and a point of view, and we do too, and we need to make sure that those align. And that's really what I mean by customer obsession.
Absolutely love that. Well, and it comes back to one of the first things you said when we started talking about expectations, which is the idea of domain expertise. Don't just be a product expertise or a product expert, because then you're sort of walking around with Contentsquare colored glasses, right? Be a domain expert and be prepared to advise the customer, where in some cases it might not necessarily be the best answer for Contentsquare, but it's the best answer for customer. And to your point, invariably they're going to remember that, and when it is the right time, they'll be back. Now, you mentioned, you made it very clear that in addition to setting expectations with your team, you use those expectations to set expectations with the other organizations, such as sales, I'm assuming product, I'm assuming customer. Is that an important foundation when these sort of scenarios surface? Because I would imagine that sales probably doesn't like to hear your people saying something like, well, maybe this is not the right fit.
Yeah. I mean, of course, nobody wants to hear that. It's not the right fit. Like, we might have to walk away from this opportunity. It might be the best logo in your patch or whatever the scenario is. But if you have, again, what I have found is that having those really transparent, open conversations up front allows you to have constructive disagreements later on with a positive aligned outcome, where it might be that maybe in this situation, I could self-critique and say, you know what, I was being too tight around that scenario. I should be a bit more flexible, and we could actually figure out how this could work in this way. Or it works the other way, where like, hey, this isn't going to work, and here's why it's not going to work, and we can have a really constructive conversation around that. And so it's important to lay that foundation to set up the future for that stuff, for those conversations. And I found it to be critical, and ultimately it yields a significant potential productivity gain where we're all focusing and aligned to the same North Star. And for me, that's probably the biggest outcome of why I have that conversation cross-functionally with those other teams, is not just to say, here's how they get bonused and promoted, and here's their variable, et cetera, and here's how they get paid, and that's how they're incentivized. It goes a lot deeper than that, and make sure that this is the psychology of how my team thinks. And it's really important that you understand that, because I want to also understand from you, other leader of other team, how are you managing your team? Because I want to work effectively with not just you, but when those people come to me or come to myself and other people on my team, that we work seamlessly, and we spend a lot more time on getting stuff done, and less time kind of beating around the bush saying, whose swim lane is what, and what are you focusing on?
Yeah. Cliff chimed in again, helping you get to, quote, know fast is a great value, but requires a great deal of trust. And honestly, Nick, I mean, this is what I hear you doing in a very tangible way, is by setting these expectations, both with your team, the expectations that you have of them, and the expectations that they can have and should have of you, the expectations that your sales counterparts can have of your team. And my guess is you probably ask them, what is it that we can and reasonably expect from you? You're really establishing a foundation to build trust within the organization, within the team, and across teams.
Yeah. And I recognize as a leader, by the way, that I do not have all the answers. And I am not, one of the best things somebody told me is, some of the best leaders are the ones who recognize that they're not the smartest person in the room. Trust me, I know I am not the smartest person in the room. But what I do have, I think, in my tool bag is I think the emotional intelligence to understand that and be able to sort of see who is in this room with me and what are we trying to achieve as the outcome, and saying, I think you might be the better person for this, or even saying, as I mentioned, this thing evolves over time. So I'll put myself on the spot and say, hey, what are you guys missing from me? And I do that in a group setting. I also do that in one-on-one settings. Because sometimes just certain conversations need to happen that way, and it allows me to really understand, like, a self-reflection, and say, this is how this team needs to be operating to be most successful moving forward. And so I think one of the most critical things to have as a leader is that understanding, and being able to check your ego at the door, and knowing that you're there to make everyone on your team successful, and that like it is possible that I could fail at some of these expectations, by the way, and understanding that and saying I'm not always right, and being okay with saying I can make mistakes and I need to work on those mistakes and evolve and develop and change over time. And ultimately, I think that's how you and I started talking too, with some of these things from your book itself, right? I sent you a picture the other day. I was like, hey, I'm starting to read this thing, and there's some similarities there. And I think it's really, really critical as a leader that you're able to do that, which trickles down to your team and trickles out to the rest of the organization as well.
The words that come to mind as I hear you speaking are not just emotional intelligence, they are emotional maturity. And at the end of the day, I think that's really what you're talking about, is the willingness to recognize not only am I not likely the smartest person in the room, I'm certainly not going to get 100% of any of these things right. And as you were sharing, there was a thought sort of evolving in my mind, and I'm going to invite you to be maybe just a touch vulnerable if you're willing
Sure.
to.
No worries. I'm happy.
And that is, as you think about the core concepts, I think you said the 8 core concepts that are on your list of expectations that your team can expect from you. Are any of them somewhat aspirational? And if so, are there some that maybe are harder for you to live up to than others, that you sort of have to be very consciously intentional to make sure you're following or living up to those expectations?
Yeah. I definitely think so. I mean, I think the hardest one, it's the hardest one for individual SCs. It's the hardest one for myself. It's how are you constantly, it goes back to like the growth mindset and the learning, actually, for me. I think it's the most important one, and it's also the hardest one to do. Because it's transformational of you as the individual person, right? And let's just use that term for now, because that's me. That's a SC. It's a salesperson. It's a customer success person. It's all of us, right? And so you have to be okay with being uncomfortable. It's like, which I hope you just asked me. I hope you're okay with making yourself vulnerable. You have to be okay with that and being like, you're right. I have to be okay that I may not be the subject matter expert in every single topic that I am responsible for. And I might need to say, you know what, I don't know the answer, or I don't have the right solution, or I tried this, but I failed miserably, even if I did come at it with something. So it's being able to understand that and constantly push yourself. I mean, one of the hardest things probably for me, one of the harder things that I think I've experienced in my career was trying to take this mindset. And, Contentsquare about 18 months or so ago acquired a company, right? And acquired a good sized organization, Keep Analytics. We acquired them, brought in the tremendous technology and tremendous set of people, right? And it's hard to incorporate multiple companies together, right? Just to start at a very macro level. Like I can't imagine what all the stuff our C-suite went through, right? But then I think about my just team and interacting with those folks is, they had their culture and we had our culture, and now we're trying to mash 2 cultures together where there was similarities for sure, but there was also tremendous differences. And getting all of us aligned on the same page took time. And I'll be honest, I failed several times in that process, but through that failure, I learned so much about just myself and all these other people that I think ultimately what we've built today is a significant net positive above what they were individually and what we were individually, right? This 1 + 1 = 3 mentality, I think, is now really ringing true. And for me, that was probably one of the biggest things, is being able to learn and measure myself relative to it's not even like a defined outcome, right? It's sort of a bit subjective, but being able to really understand that and where you are, and being able to be okay with mistakes, but just being honest about those.
Yeah. I'm going to hit pause, Nick, just for one more moment.
Yeah.
Folks, I'm speaking to Nick Schneider. He's a director of solution consulting with North America, Contentsquare. We've been talking about the expectations that he established for his team and the expectations he said that they can expect of him. Nick, I can't help but notice how personable and authentic you come across, and you present yourself, and you have a certain, you just have a certain, I don't know if it's confidence in yourself. You have a sort of a relaxing way about yourself. Is that one of the things that you also try to encourage your team? Clearly you demonstrate it. Where do you think that comes from? And is that something that you try to impart on your people?
Yeah, it's absolutely something I try to impart on my people for sure. It's just, being your true self and your authentic self is the best way to communicate anything, right? And then if we go right to what we do at Contentsquare, it's the best way to communicate what we do and how we do it and how we do it better and differently, right? And for me, it came from, I mean, I can't even tell you that. I still remember my first call as an SDR. Where I mentioned that I used to work at Marketo, right? Like I had my sheet, my discovery sheet. I had all these things, right? It was when you were in an office, right? So I had all these laminated battle cards on my desk and the whole thing. And you make that first call, and like, the chances that they're going to hang up on you are tremendously high and all this stuff. And it was just, it develops over time, right? And so part of it just comes through confidence and knowing what I'm trying to go achieve, right? What am I trying to, what do I want as the outcome of whatever conversation or interaction I'm having? And just knowing that, hey, like I'm going to try to reflect myself in the best way I can, and just being an authentic human and an authentic person is critical to build that trust with that other person who maybe is hearing me talk for the absolute first time in their life. And within 5 minutes, I need to be able to build some level of trust through a digital Zoom call or similar, communication method. And like you and I were talking about earlier, I don't really have body language to help me do that anymore if I'm on the Zoom. So what am I left with? I'm left with tone, and I'm left with the way I speak and how I communicate, and then the words I'm choosing. And so if I'm left to really just that, and I remember part of my training back in life was 90% of what we communicate is via body language. Now I have a 10% bucket to play with. So if I'm in that 10% bucket, there's a lot of psychology that goes into that. And so it's not trying to say I'm gaming or manipulating. It's just saying the best way that I can do this is just say, let's insert myself, the best version of if I can, into that 10%. And that's the opportunity I have to drive to whatever that outcome is that we're shooting for. And so for me, that's really how this has developed, I guess, over time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I heard a gentleman a number of years ago. He does something similar to me. He does some sales coaching and sales training, and I just happened to sit through a talk he did, and he said at some point something to the effect of, in essence, we're linguists. That's it. Like the quote, the tool in the tool bag is the words that we have, the words that we use, and the way in which we use them, right? And to your point, there's only so, I mean, there's a little bit of body language that comes through Zoom, but not much, right? Not much. Maybe maybe we've gone from 10% to 12%, right?
Yeah.
But it's the words we use, the way in which we use those, the tone of voice, our energy level, our pacing, all that. The other thought that comes to mind for me, and this is just a sense that I get from having met you briefly once and having had a few conversations. My sense is that, and I say this with a great deal of respect, you seem to not take yourself too seriously. And as a result, I think the more we can not take ourselves so seriously and just be at peace with the fact that, look, we're just as human as anybody else. We're just as imperfect as anybody else. And we're going to put it out there. We're going to try. We're going to give it our all, and we're going to learn and then grow from there. I just feel am I striking on something for you?
Yeah. No, I think you definitely are. For me, it's that's it. Honestly, that's exactly it. Is just being your authentic self and communicating that way it's the best you got. Right. So like, just put your best foot forward and go through it. I mean, we talk about this all the time at Contentsquare, where we're like, you need to script your dry runs and do all the preps and all these things for all the stuff, which is totally true. And like for this meeting, I know we didn't really prep for this. So this is kind of coming off a whim here, but like when you're going into those more formal business meetings, you're doing that. But at the end of the day, the difference is the twist you put on it, right? As your own individual person. So like, we train everyone to demo the product a certain way, but I'm always like 80% of it's got to be consistent with how we're messaging as an organization. That last 20%, roughly, is you. It's how you as the sales reps talk about it. It's how you as the pre-sales person talk about it. It's how you as the SDR talks about it. And that piece is what can create really strong trust, credibility, differentiation. And so for me, it's just fundamental. It's something I think about probably way too much. But going back to the other part, which is, yeah, but like, you just gotta have fun with it. Like you can't take yourself too seriously. And like you said, I got 3 kids. I'm a giant kid at heart. Like one of my favorite things to do is we go play hoops and we go do all sorts of just like silly things. I get to be a kid again sometimes, right? Which is great. And so I think if you can lead with that and operate with that mindset, I actually think you'll see a lot more success than you would realize.
And I gotta say, it's just refreshing. It's refreshing to be around people who don't take life too seriously, don't take themselves too seriously, serious about the job, serious about putting forth the right effort, but have a certain relaxed sort of mentality about them. I don't know. There's just something really refreshing about it. And I love this whole 80-20 idea. It's interesting. I've never run a marathon myself, and I have zero plans to ever run a marathon.
Agreed.
However, I understand. I've spoken to countless people who have run marathons before, and they've told me about the training sort of, routine. And I guess leading, in the months leading up to a marathon, maybe once a week or every other week, you start doing long runs. Like maybe you'll do a 10-miler, and then a couple of weeks later, you'll do a 15-miler. And then a couple of weeks later, but you never do you never run a marathon in preparation for running a marathon. You might run up to 17, 18, 19 miles, but you leave the last 20% for the day of the race. Yeah. To me, that's a great analogy for preparing for or planning the big strategic meeting, the demo where all the key stakeholders are going to be in the room. Yeah. Don't plan every word. Don't plan every script. Don't plan every clip. You gotta leave room to improvise, right?
Have a structure, have a plan, know what you're gonna do and how you think you're gonna execute, but you gotta have the ability and the skill set and the confidence to be able to I actually had a recent SC telling me to be able to off-road, right? You gotta be able to off-road. You gotta be able to be, flexibility, off-roading, not operating on that straight linear path that you've crafted. And that's, again, goes back to to use your words, the authenticity comes into play, because I think people see that transition happen. They're like, okay, they're taking me through this thing, which I've asked for, or I want to see. And then we maybe ask that one question that was a bit unique to our business that we hadn't told them yet, or hadn't told Contentsquare yet. And then when that SC recognizes that and then does that slight little off-road and change, it makes all the difference in the world. And you can earn yourself significant credibility. By the way, and that can go both positive or like, hey, great thing you asked about. We just don't quite do it like this, but we do it like that. That also earns credibility, right? So the ability to have that, which goes back to domain expertise and confidence and discovery, it goes back, again, that giant flywheel. If you can do that well, like you're going to be tremendously successful.
Yeah. You've just given me a new term to use in some of my sessions. Be ready to go off-road when needed. Right. Good. I've heard the term audible ready. That's another one that I like.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Nick, believe it or not, we have been at this for 50 minutes. So
wow, we're gonna, already?
Right? Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, it does.
We're gonna wrap this thing up here pretty quickly. As I like to say, the runway is in sight, the landing gear is out, and we will be landing this plane here momentarily. Right. So it's time to put the seat backs up, tray tables up, and put away your laptops. Nick, I think there's probably just one more question that I want to ask, and that is, you said that you've been with Contentsquare for about 6 years, and when you joined them, you were an IC, which and now you're obviously a leader. So that tells me that you've been in a management role for less than 6 years. So I'm guessing sometime in the past, what, 3, 4, 5 years is when you made that transition, when you made that switch?
Yeah, so I actually ran an SC team before, a small one at a smaller startup.
Okay.
And then I went back to IC work for a little bit, and now I'm back into management. So a little bit longer than that, but yeah, I'm not a 20-year veteran of as an SC leader.
Okay.
No, that's
okay.
For sure.
Well, the fact that you've got a little bit of background helps me. What I was going to say and then ask is that you just strike me to have a certain, I'll just use the word maturity about you as a leader, and particularly as a leader of sales engineers, which as I believe those of us who are in that role know is particularly unique.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything that you struggled with in particular making that transition from IC to SE leader? And if so, what was it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, tremendous. I mean, I think one of the hardest things to do is I was a pretty successful IC. I was always at the top of the leaderboard, if not number one, always top three, right? Like really doing a great job there. But I mentioned earlier, what works for me doesn't work for everybody else, right? And so I think one of the biggest struggles I think most leaders make is they go, great, what I need to do when I become a leader is I just need to take myself and make 7 more of me, or whatever that is, right? That's not gonna work, right? And so like almost like dictating that is not going to work. What you can do instead, and what I've learned, is it's more about identifying and working with people on a real, foundational level, and saying like, here's the things that I used to do that I found to be successful. What I hear from you is this process this is like how you had to operate, and you've seen success in this way as well. So here, and kind of making it a lot more of a mutual conversation and discussion, and never prescribing it, never saying you must do. I mean, sure, there are certain things you have to please log into Salesforce and log your stuff or whatever. Yeah, there's always that stuff. But like what I'm really getting is like the real things that make sales engineers unique. It's having it be a mutual conversation. And also, by the way, I'm a huge believer in empowering peer-to-peer relationships. And so not only from myself to my managers or to my SCs on the team, but also enabling that culture of them being able to share and collaborate more effectively to learn, hey, this SC has worked a lot of these types of things and you haven't seen it before, you can learn from them. And just enabling that culture of transparency, honesty, and coaching is important, because again, some of the first mistakes I made is this must happen this way because I saw it work for me. I ain't gonna fly. These people are too damn smart, right? Like they have their own ways that work well. So you gotta be able to adapt to that.
Yeah, it's really well said. Cliff asked a similar question. I don't know if this strikes a particular chord in a different way. What was your biggest hurdle moving into leadership from a day-to-day perspective? As we sort of wrap things up, anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think ruthless time management and prioritization is critical. And so when I first was doing it, I was like, I can do everything. I can just do it all, right? And I would spend 10, 12 hours and I'd be burned out real quick, right? And so it was really about being okay with, not that I'm going to not do certain things, but I'm going to put them on the back burner and develop them, or frankly, learn how to delegate a lot more effectively. Because as an IC, right, when you're working with your counterpart and you're working deals or working customers or whatever it might be, you sort of have your day-to-day and you're working hand in hand, that's your focus. And so if you are kind of doing the things that you're expected to do as a leader, because you sort of have your fingers and hands in a lot of different places, some of those things you have to be responsible for yourself. Some of them you work in a project or a team very cross-functionally. And some of them, it's actually to your benefit to delegate them, not just for my own sanity, but also to be able to elevate other people. One of the things actually a former leader of mine told me is like, you really also, as a leader, one of the most important things you do is develop a leadership bench. Who are the people who are showing those qualities that could potentially develop into a manager, assuming that's what they want to do in their career? And so by delegating, you give yourself that opportunity to sort of test those people and help develop them if they're showing those traits. And so for me, that was probably one of the biggest things, is learning how to delegate really effectively. It's a challenge in the beginning, but it gets easier and it gets a lot more fun when you do it.
Amen. Yeah. I know when I was a leader, that was probably my biggest challenge was rather than being a leader, I was just trying to be super SE. And,
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Cliff, thank you so much for the question. And for anybody else who's been hanging around, thank you so much for being here. Nick, this has been just a pleasure. And I sure hope you'll come back and chat again. Any closing words from you as we wrap things up, sir?
Honestly, no, not too much. I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was a lot of fun. I had never done this before, frankly, and I thought this is a great first experience. So we set the bar pretty high, Chris. I think I'm excited for the next opportunity there. Cool. I just think maybe my last thing I'd say is, like, as a leader, it's just really important to be humble and be present and engage with the people on your team and having fun while doing it. So for me, that's what I think some of the intrinsic characteristics of a good leader are.
I can't think of a better way to close. I would be remiss if I didn't publicly say that list of core, I think, concepts or principles that you've been keeping and curating over the years. Yeah. Sounds a little bit to me like there might be a book in there somewhere. So maybe. That and what was it? The 10 rules of being a Swiss Army knife. I may be poking and prodding you over the years to put pen to paper. Folks, if you hung around until now, thanks so much for joining. If you caught the recording, I hope you enjoyed this. If you've not seen these shows before, you can follow hashtag Tech Sales Advice. Nick, hang around backstage just for a minute and we can part ways properly. Thank you so much for being here. This has been great fun. I've learned a thing or two, and I'm certain anybody listening has as well. So be well, and folks, we'll see you next week on Tech Sales Advice.